Hello, I'm Beverly Payne, and this is Pain and Simple Makes. Thanks for joining me today. So we've been kind of busy making paper flowers and doing some projects with cardstock. And recently, I guess it's because it's the time of year. You know, it's late spring, school's getting out. Summer's coming. I was thinking about like crafts that I used to do when I was a kid, and one of the things that I remember doing, I think this was in Vacation Bible School, was taking old plastic containers that Mom had around the house and covering them with some really pretty paper. So that's the project that I've got for you today. We're going to recycle some old Cool Whip and sour cream containers and a metal tin, like a cookie tin. And we're just going to apply some pretty paper to it, like scrapbooking paper or any kind of nice pattern paper that you might have. And this is a really simple craft. If you've got children or grandchildren and you want a really quick art project for them this summer, this may be what you want to do. But here's one example. This is just a nice rose floral paper that I have covered this container with, and it literally is a sour cream container. And I've put one of my spider plants in there. And then here is another version. This is Cool Whip, and I don't know if you can see this. I've got a couple of different kinds of pattern paper on this one, some stripes and some little circles. Kind of reminds me of a birthday. And then in my cookie tin, I just used a nice green and white stripe pattern paper, and I have put some of my markers in there. So this is a really nice project, and like I said, it's something that you can do if you've got kids or grandkids, or if like me, you get tired of all these plastic containers or tin containers piling up in your cabinets, because I have a hard time throwing them away. But I can make them a little bit prettier and then use them for something in my home, like a flower pot. So let's get started. The materials you need for this project are basic. You need Mod Podge or some type of glue or adhesive, containers that you're going to recycle. You need scissors or a rotary cutter, and then you need your pattern paper. It could be scrapbooking paper, tissue paper, whatever you like. You just don't want it to be too thick, too heavy. We're going to start by measuring our first container. I'm starting with my cookie tin, and I've got to choose my paper. Sometimes it's a hard decision. I like this seashell pattern, but I don't think that it's going to work as well or look as nice on my tin as this striped green and white paper. So I think I'm going to go with the green and white stripe. It's fortunate that I can get this piece of paper all the way around my container, so I just need to cut for the height. I've got it placed on my cutting mat, and the cutting mat is not quite as big as I would like for it to be, but I didn't want to use my my sewing or quilting mat for this project, since we're going to be using glue. You know the old adage, measure twice, cut once? You usually hear that when you're talking about carpentry or woodworking, but I think it holds true for crafting as well. I spend a lot of time measuring before I cut. It doesn't take but a few of those miscalculations to let me know that maybe I should measure more than once. And I hate wasting supplies, which is what happens when you have a miscalculation on your measurements. So this is a two-sided piece of paper, but I like the green and white stripe much better than the red and white stripe. So we're going to let the green and white be the outside of the container. So I use Mod Podge on this project, and this is a furniture gloss Mod Podge. If you don't pour this out into a plastic bowl, make sure that your brush will fit in the opening of the container. You don't have to use Mod Podge. You can use glue or some other type of adhesive. And if you check out the accompanying blog post on this project, you will see that I've linked to a do-it-yourself Mod Podge recipe. So you want to take your brush and dip it into your Mod Podge and then paint the back of the paper. You want to get a good coat on it. You don't have to saturate it, but you want a good coat of Mod Podge so that it adheres well to your container, in this case my tin. Since this is a small tin, I'm just going to place it down on the paper and roll it. You just want to make sure that you keep it straight and try to keep all the bubbles out of it. This tin has a nice edge on the bottom, and that helps me keep it straight. So I just roll it all the way around the tin, and I pull that paper tight, making sure not to tear it or rip it. You do want your ends to overlap just a little bit. So you want to press that seam down, try to press any air bubbles that may have gotten in there out, smooth any of those wrinkles. The next thing is to apply a coat of the Mod Podge or the glue to the outside of the paper. And I just do this with the same brush. This helps to seal the project, seal the paper, and it just gives you a little extra protection. You want to apply that all the way around. For the second container, we're going to use the big sour cream container that I have. And I measure, and I make sure that I've got that measurement in my head. Sometimes I'll jot it down on the paper that I'm using as my work surface. And then we've got to choose our paper for the second container. I really like these roses. This is such a nice floral paper, and the roses are on the bigger side, and I think it'll look nice on this larger sour cream container that I've got. So you want to cut your paper to the right height, and since this is a bigger container, I will need more than one strip to get all the way around it. So I have my paper cut into 3 strips, and again I just paint or apply the glue to the back side of the paper so it's covered really well. Once you have a good coat on the back side of the paper, you will start applying the paper to the plastic container. Again, you don't want your paper totally wet, but you need to get good coverage with that paintbrush and the adhesive. Alright, so pick it up and apply it to the container. I apologize for being out of the frame in this video. I'm still getting used to this whole filming thing, and I forget sometimes exactly where the camera is pointing. So here's one thing that you need to be mindful of with this type of container. The bottom is not as wide as the top of the container, so the paper doesn't want to lie flat. And so what I'm doing is I'm taking my scissors and making inch-long snips in the paper where it's wanting to bunch up. This allows me to let that edge lie flat, and it allows me to overlap a little bit without creating a big wrinkle. It's easier to work in smaller sections, and that's really how I should have started with this project, is cutting these strips into smaller sections. I'm going to cut the end of this paper off to make it a little bit easier to apply. I'm going to have to add some more Mod Podge to the paper here. It dries out pretty quickly, but that's okay, because once it dries you can certainly add more to it, just like I'm doing here with this strip. And since this is a smaller strip, it will be a little easier to get that on without too many wrinkles or bubbles. But this is just the nature of applying paper to a container whose base is a little bit smaller than the top. I need to put one more section of paper on, so I measure how much I need, and I cut a strip that should be long enough to overlap both the start and the end, so that I have complete coverage on the container. And I measure this basically just by eyeballing it. It doesn't have to be exact. And that's because you know you want to cut enough to overlap, so there won't be any gaps. So just brush the adhesive onto the back of that paper, just like we've been doing, and then position and apply it to the container. This is a process. You just have to smooth it out as you go. And remember the trick with snipping about an inch down there at the bottom. That'll help you too with those wrinkles. Once you have the paper glued onto the container, you want to add another coat of the Mod Podge to the outside. Again, this is to seal it and to protect it. Go all the way around the container. Make sure you get those seams really well. This coating does not have to be really thick. It just needs to cover the entire container. So this will help our paper not to peel up or peel off once it dries. Okay, we've got 2 more containers that we want to do, and they're about the same size, and these are whip topping containers. And as we've done before, we're going to measure how tall these containers are, and it looks like they're the same size. Measuring again just to make sure. So I think that I will do something just a little bit differently with these 2 containers. Instead of trying to wrap a longer piece of paper around the container, I'm going to cut each of my strips into smaller pieces. And I'm using 2 different kinds of paper. One of them is striped, multicolored stripe, and the other pattern is circles, but they're complementary patterns. And this way I can alternate stripes and circles on these two containers. So I'm cutting the strips into squares, and I start off by putting the Mod Podge on the back side of a square, and then I add it to the bowl. It's a little bit hard to put this Mod Podge on these tiny pieces of paper. You want to make sure to orient the pattern the correct way. So I want my stripes running up and down and not sideways, so it's important to remember that. I'm going to alternate the pattern. So since I put stripes on first, I want to make my next one the circle pattern. Instead of applying the Mod Podge to the paper, I'm actually applying it directly to the container. That seems to make more sense. It's easier, it's quicker, since these pieces of paper are smaller than the other ones that we were using on the other two examples. And since the pieces are smaller, it's actually a little easier to make sure that there aren't any wrinkles too. I'm going to continue with my next piece, and as soon as I get all the pieces onto the container, I add Mod Podge on the outside of the paper. And I do this for both of these containers, both of these whip topping containers. Now I have 4 containers, and I really just need them to dry. I'm going to set them up on top of the lids and let them dry. And there you have it. This is a quick and easy project. You can use different types of containers, just like I did, and you just need a bit of Mod Podge or glue and some nice paper for a great decoupage project. If you like this project, please click like below and subscribe to my YouTube channel. Check out my blog at painandsimple.com.